Hello, and welcome to the Polaris Design Podcast. For this episode, we'll be talking to a designer from my group, which is exploring the topic of permadeath, designing meaning and loss. Just to start off, I'd love to hear a little bit about you and who you are and what drew you to this topic.
Hey, hello. Hi, Nina. My name is Jon Remedios. I am an independent designer from Toronto. A little bit about me. How do you summarize that? I have done so many things in games. I've had a storied path through the casual download space, Facebook games, early App Store games. It wasn't even a brief stint. I had a substantial stint where I was designing and porting games that were exclusively available on a proprietary platform that was made for set-top boxes that were only available in France. I've been independent for about a decade now. I do I work on my own projects, and I help other teams and do a bit of board game design as well. As for what drew me to this topic, there's the functional answer, which is I was asked. I'm a substitute Polaris attendee, so I joined late. And it was the smallest group, but also it was the most interesting topic upon some reflection because, I'm in the midst of prototyping a bunch of different potential projects. And in one of them, I had been wrestling with whether or not a game should have permadeath or if I should, rely on a meta progression system. I, after banging my head against it for, I don't know how long, I sort of defaulted to the meta progression system, and that felt bad. Like it was not a satisfactory solution to the problem. And so the weight of the current expectation for meta progression systems to mitigate the pain of quote unquote permadeath has put a bit of a sour taste in my mouth, and any exploration to see if there are alternatives to that was pretty appealing.
Yeah. I mean, just to make this clear, you're so much more than a substitute.
Oh, thank you.
Just letting you know, you are a valued attendee and participant of Polaris. And it's been great to have you in the group. So I'm very appreciative.
Thanks,
so let's dive into what are some of the questions we're trying to answer.
It's interesting. The initial proposal was my interpretation of it was how do we modernize permadeath, right? So in the shadow of progression systems that sort of make death feel more tolerable, how does a permadeath system, like this is not a value judgment, but how does like a quote unquote true permadeath system fit into the current context? But as we talked about it, the real question seemed to emerge. The primary question of it's not an issue of how do we remove pain from the player experience. Pain and frustration is always to some degree going to be inevitable if the player is invested. It's how do we make the players more accepting of that pain, and that's where this idea of finding meaning in permadeath or loss or whatever it ends up being framed as when we write the paper came about, because it seems like a difficult ask, and we as designers don't have a series of tools to allow players to feel pain. We're always trying to optimize for the player experience, or we tend to optimize for the player experience. How do we make them comfortable? How do we make this experience more enjoyable? What are the ways that we can keep that friction in, but give players opportunities to recontextualize something that's seen as unpleasant that still is additive to the overall experience, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. I mean, I was really interested in the topic because, well, in real life, I'm really afraid of death. And often we try to avoid it. We try to avoid the pain of death. But there's a lot of beautiful things about death. And especially when you learn how to accept it, or when you shift the perspective a bit, there's a lot of things that people can benefit from being close to death, or understanding how to accept it, or understanding life in contrast to death. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think that's the way we've been thinking about, like, the real life comparison feels apt, at least as an analogy, right? Because death is an important part of the human experience. And so if we decide as designers that we want to ignore it, which is, I just want to make it clear, it's completely valid. It's not, I'm not saying that every game needs to have people and players, reckon with the end of our own human lives. But if that's the not even if that's the default option, if that's the only option or the prominent option, we are sort of narrowing our possibility space of what we can explore, and in terms of what it means to be human, because there are real opportunities here to feel like we're learning just a little bit about how to handle loss in our actual lives. And the end of our own lives. I think maybe that's a bit too lofty. Cut that.
No, it totally works. There's a lot of potential in giving a different perspective, or like when we talk to people about their experiences in permadeath and games, it is you do see a pattern. Like in a lot of instances, it carries a lot of weight and allows people to value their gameplay more, or value the life of their gameplay more. So I think there is a lot of potential there. So it makes a lot of sense.
Sorry, just one more thing about the real life lens, because I think, like, when you're at, the initial question was about questions, right? What questions we've been trying to answer, and it has been helpful to look at this problem through the lens of how do we find meaning and acceptance in grief in real life, and are any of those things easily mapped, or maybe not even easily, but is there any sort of mapping between, like, the way grief counselors or sort of grief acceptance or finding meaning in grief in the real world will map to a player story, like the end of a player story. So
yeah,
it's been an interesting question to explore.
That actually leads into my next question, because for me, so the question is, did you find anything surprising during your conversations? And for me, it was, there's a lot of things from real life experiences that map over, like it translates really well into gameplay. And I kind of suspected, but when taking a look at it, when we saw those examples, it was like, a lot of these work. So yeah, what did you find surprising?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to figure out if it was surprising to me, because in retrospect, I don't know that it seems surprising. It feels like an inevitability, right? But I do think that shift to looking at things through the lens of grief and just in general the human experience has. I was surprised at how fruitful it's been. Like, I think it's really been very clarifying in like defining the problem and, like, kind of exploring that problem space. I was also surprised at the breadth of responses to, like, meaningful permadeath that people have experienced in games. We've all come into this topic with our own biases, obviously, but I think mine was fairly narrow in terms of what I was, the genre space, or like the type of game I was thinking about when considering permadeath. But we've had people talk to us about The Sims. We've had people talk to us about like TTRPGs. We've had people share stories about, like, extraction shooters, and like we've only been here for a little while, so it's hard to clump these all together. But the thing that they all share is like a genuine sense of loss, which I think is incredible, and I've been very fascinated by that.
Yeah, I loved hearing about everyone's stories. It was sort of like everything that I thought about, like surrounding permadeath, was blurry. It's like when I'm seeing without my glasses. Like I get the general sense that it's there, and I can see, oh, that's a person, or that's a chair over there. But when I put my glasses on, it's like, oh, it all fits into place. Like it really works. Really wanted to talk about sort of what key principles you found when looking into like all those stories, all those player examples, and what specifically you found from the real life instances that translated over, because we said that there were some, but we didn't say what they were.
Yeah. So I might answer those questions backwards. So I think from the using real life as like the source of inspiration, one of the key things that has stuck out to me, at least, is that there are opportunities to inject meaning or find meaning that are transferable from how people or where people find meaning in real life loss, and I think they're generally broken down into four. I don't know if I'll remember all of them in this moment, but the loss, like the moment of like, oh, I don't get to do that thing anymore. Like I don't get to be that character. I don't get to tell this player story anymore. That's over. There's an opportunity to like find meaning in just the act of having lost itself. There's the impact, like the thing that, how that character's or how that player story like changed something in the world. There's remembering that player story after the fact. This is a very common theme that we've talked about a great deal, is like this idea of memorialization that really seems to resonate with people. And another one that I can't remember off the top of my head.
It's hard to recall. There's a lot of things that we talked about, like a lot of people, when they were talking about their stories, there was some component of, which isn't necessary in all meaning, but there's some component of connecting with someone or like sacrificing for someone. Like your death is meaningful because you're contributing to someone else's benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, that's sort of like like this is a way that like of just saying either verbally or non-verbally, like this person or player or character or whatever was here, like in this whatever, this moment of time and space, whatever that means inside the game.
It kind of like some of them just fall into multiple categories. Like some of them are in impact and also memorialization. There's like some forms of it, or like impacting another, the world is impact. It just feels like they're all in like different sections, but it does seem like it clearly adds to the meaning of the permadeath. Yeah. Totally.
Can you remind me of what the other part of that question was? Because there was like, what was the real life mapping, and then the like key takeaways or
oh yeah, key principles.
Key principles. Yeah. I think our intention is largely to identify tools available. And I feel like we have identified a number of them. We've talked about a couple already. We talk about memorialization, and just to be clear, when we say memorialization, like just having some way to remember a player story specifically. I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but something as simple as a tombstone in a game could count as that, just like a way of remembering a player story that existed, and potentially giving the player a space and time to revisit that and remember it. Impact, like you said, as well, just like doing something very meaningful in the world that's especially applicable in a multiplayer setting. I'm ending, but now you can continue forward. And I'm sure there will be some sense of grief and loss amongst the rest of the crew or party or squad or whatever. We've had a lot of talk about authorship and co-authorship, where there's a way to find meaning in loss if you invite the player to be an active participant in the story that they're trying to tell, right? This can look very different depending on the game, but an example that comes to mind is granular control over the types of challenges or like difficulty level. There's a lot of different ways you can do it, but effectively the player saying like, this is how I kind of want to find meaning by tuning my game experience, almost pre-vets some of the potential meaningless deaths, and says like, I don't think I will find meaning in telling these types of stories. Let's get them out of here, and now I can kind of do my own thing. We've talked about priming a lot. Part of what we've explored at Polaris is the difference between permadeath and permanent loss. How we've defined that is loss is effectively the loss of a unit, and permadeath is like the super loss. It is like the end of your play experience, the end of your player's story, hard stop. Like you just can't go back to it, and then everything resets. But that doesn't detract from, if you lose a soldier in XCOM, or the example I keep coming back to our Nuzlocke runs in Pokemon. Like if you have a Pokemon faint and then release them, that is still a way of feeling pain. There I'm almost certainly will be some sort of pain felt by an invested player in those situations. But they, the player has the how that relates to like finding meaning in permadeath is it creates a situation where the player understands that like the contract they signed, that the world that they're engaging in is a place that permanent loss happens, and eventually their own permanent loss, potentially will and probably will.
Yeah. I always thought that permanent loss we kind of felt like it was a bit tangential to like actual permadeath, but it keeps coming up because the line between them is quite blurred. Like it's sort of like, oh, that's interesting. I actually consider that permadeath. And I think someone described it as a limb, like the permanent the permanent loss is a limb. And when I envision it like that, it's like, oh yeah, I don't want to lose all my arms and legs. That's a significant loss. It's very impactful. So, but with that terminology, it really did solidify that for me. I was like, yes, permanent loss can feel like a permadeath, but the way that we're defining it, permadeath is like the whole. And so, but that does get a little confusing when it's like a player specific permadeath. So it's like a run or like a whole community and that sort of thing. But it did, when we finally reached that point where we defined that, it was very clearing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like the thing that's helped clarify my thinking on it, at least, is, sorry, I'm jumping around, but, we've talked about grief sort of implicitly through a baseline assumption that we're talking about the grief of like the death of a person that we know, like a loved one. But in reality, like grief can happen in many different avenues in a person's life, in many different forms. One can grieve a relationship or a job or a dream that can no longer be attained. or one's own abilities as they age. Like there's so many ways that people can grieve, and so that maps to the changing of scale a bit. Like you can grieve a community, the loss of a community. Whether it's like servers shutting down in an MMO, that's not sort of out of scope of what we're talking about, but it is an example of like ways that people can experience grief across many different many different contexts in games, and that's helped me be like, okay, yeah. So it doesn't just have to be a single player character. It can be your fortress in Dwarf Fortress, or it can be like your bloodline in Crusader Kings or something.
Yeah, So you actually answered a lot of my questions. So I'm just going freeform, but I remember we talked a lot about The Sims and also the idea of we use the term soap opera death. Mm-hmm. And did you want to explain what that is?
Soap opera, yeah. So I think soap opera death is effectively a fake death, right? Like it's a death, and then you give players tools. I don't remember how it relates to The Sims, but you give players potentially tools or opportunities to make that loss meaningful in the future. So like the most obvious example is like you let someone rewind, and then we're not really talking about permadeath anymore. But hypothetically, like if that loss came back in some form in the future, without necessarily bringing back like a whole player or character or whatever, that could recontextualize the death in the future. I have to admit, I'm not super confident in my understanding of soap opera deaths, and how it relates entirely as a tool. But we'll get there. We're still have some time before we present.
What I found interesting, because I heard a few examples from other people about how that made them feel, soap opera deaths. Some of them felt like it cheapened their experience with the death. And I found that interesting because sometimes you really resonate with the death. You're like, okay, this was really meaningful to me, and I've grieved and I've moved past it, and it means a lot. And then when it's reversed, it's like, oh, well, I don't know how to feel about that. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it made it more clear the potential of a permadeath and the benefits of that. Like, I think in the beginning of the work group, I was like, oh, it's like a mandala. Like you're like, oh, I have like lived this life and I've done it with such intention that like it's time. It's okay for it to be wiped. And there's a lot of meaning to that. And if it's not, if someone just saves it, then it's no longer the same meaning, which isn't bad.
Sure.
It's just a different experience.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So I have one final question for you, but if you want to, share anything else that we've missed or that comes to mind, you can also be free to do that. But if you had to distill the conversations that we've had for the past 2 days and take away one or two highlights or favorite parts of the conversation that really stood out to you, I would love to hear that.
Yeah, so I think the distillation, or at least the two key takeaways that we've been talking about is that meaning from loss can happen at different times in the loss. So it can happen before, that's when we're talking about sort of things that involve player contracts or customization or stuff that happens before the game has started. It can happen during, that's when we're talking about personalization, naming things, or like shaping the player story in some way. And it can happen after the fact, such as memorialization. Like that's extremely interesting to me at least. And the second takeaway is that it's not necessarily about minimizing the pain. Like that is, I think that feels very important to what we're talking about, and that should not always be the thing that we are trying to solve for. What we should be trying to solve for is how do we make that pain matter, and how do we give players opportunities to understand that pain. So yeah, those are the two big ones. What was the other part of the question?
Oh, just anything else you want to share? Like for me, I feel like you've covered some pretty strong takeaways, but some of my favorite conversations was just like in the beginning where we were just trying to figure things out. It was like, is it length? Is it duration that causes it to be less or more meaningful or painful? And sometimes it isn't. It's like, can you have a short death? Can you have a long death with a silly death, a silly cause? Is that okay? Can you have a short death with a silly cause? Is that okay? And there's like certain factors that made it okay. Like humor is a good pairing that makes some deaths really meaningful. So yeah.
That's very, that has been very, the mess of the conversation has been incredible. I think, in terms of like other stuff that's felt interesting and I don't know, maybe weird and good, some of the theoretical stuff that we've talked about, like we've outlined some tools and have examples for them, but and we haven't dug into it a whole bunch. I'm excited to potentially dive into it deeper in the paper, but one potential tool that was brought up is the easiest way to find meaning, or the easiest tool in real life to find meaning in death, it is time, right? Like there's just a way that we as humans just need time and space to process things. Is there a way that after like a painful loss in a game or a painful permadeath or whatever, like taking time could be incentivized, and not strictly enforced. Like it's up to players, obviously, but like that sort of stuff has been very, I don't know, it feels very juicy to me, and maybe it's nothing, or maybe it's everything. I don't know.
I think it's juicy. Like in my head, it already like sparks a lot of things. I'm like, oh, what weird things could you do? Could you have them like play a different game while they're waiting, like, and have like a weird experience that like feeds it all back in? Like that's a potentially interesting experience. Yeah. So I think there's a lot there. It's so strange that the topic is so dark, like seemingly dark, because everyone was like, no, I don't want to do that topic because it's depressing or it's too dark. But it's actually really uplifting.
I think so. Yeah. It's because it's about like it's the you can't have death without life, right? And really, what we're exploring is how do you make the meaningfulness of a player life outweigh the disappointment or the pain experienced when that ends, and that's I think that just feels very transferable to individual lives. Where it's like, oh man, how do I make the most of my life? How do I enjoy?
Did you feel that? I felt that too, because when we were talking, I'm like, oh, I could really apply this to right now.
100%. Like impact, memorialization. Like there's like just authorship. Like who doesn't want to have authorship over their own lives, right? Like
it was very very good at looking at yourself. It's like, what do I value in life? What's going to give me a good death?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very strange. But like all of the instances that people had, it was like, yeah, that is meaningful.
Yeah. No, I'm just in my head. Sorry.
No, I think that's great. I don't want to take up any more of your time, but it was really wonderful talking about this, and I'm so happy to be part of this group. So it was really fun. It's kind of weird because I'm in this group, but like everyone who's listening, stay tuned for our paper. It will come in soon. And thank you for joining, and thank you for being my guest.
Thank you, Nina. Thanks for having me.